Welcome to The Less Stressed Life, all about making this your time to feel freaking awesome about your life, health, and happiness. This podcast of The Less Stressed Life is hosted by Krista Bigler. Krista is an integrative registered dietitian nutritionist who specializes in reducing food-related stress, inflammation, and symptoms of food sensitivities. She brings over a decade of nutrition expertise and playing with her food to the table. From coaching, teaching, writing, and working within a major food company to behind the scenes for a health celebrity. To learn more, visit lessstressedlife.com.
Okay, today on The Less Stressed Life, I feel so blessed to bring you all these amazing people that I know with incredible stories. I don't have to have Oprah here because there's so many amazing people in our lives, and the person that is on the other line with me today is one of those people. Elizabeth Durham is the owner of Sweet Elizabeth's Organics. And I can say that I knew Elizabeth pre-Sweet Elizabeth's Organics. But Sweet Elizabeth's is an allergy-friendly bakery. Elizabeth has a passion for providing people with food that not only tastes good, but is good for them as well. And honestly, there's just so much more to her. Elizabeth is so down to earth. We met via mutual friends because we're both kind of our own expert in our food issues. And so when you have friends and you're talking to them about what you do and who you help, they say, oh, you should talk to Elizabeth, or you should talk to this person. So the first time I think I just reached out to Elizabeth one time and we had a chat on the phone. We talked for over an hour the first time, and I felt like I'd known her my whole life. And it's really kind of been like that ever since. And soon I'll get to meet her in person at the Food Allergy Blogger Conference in Denver. She and I are meeting up. Very excited to meet her in person, and I'm very excited to bring you a few arms of her amazing story that is just going to inspire you today. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Well, thank you, Krista. Did you just compare me to Oprah? Was that it?
I think I kind of did. I'm not sure. Oh, funny. Yeah, no joke. Yeah.
I'll take it. Whatever.
Like about that time I compared you to Oprah. How funny. Funny. So yeah, there's I've known you for, I don't know, I think almost a year now. And every time we chat, I get a new big arm of your story, and we use an app where we can deliver voice memos to each other, and it's a really fun way to stay in touch with people. I feel like I wish all my friends where I've kind of fallen out of touch with, I wish we'd all use it because it makes you feel like you can stay in touch a little bit better. There's a few different phases of your story I want listeners to glean from today, from what I know about you. I know the first time we talked, you were telling me all about before you really redefined your health and really got better and found out what was making you be sick. Because several years ago, you were ill. Like, you were a very spunky, vibrant, amazing mother of what, 5? Is that right?
5, yes.
5, which is amazing. You homeschool some, you used to be a food co-op organizer, you own a business, you've owned a couple different businesses, camp counselor, which we'll talk about, but you weren't always so vibrant and healthy and energetic and amazing, like with your health, right? And so can you tell me about the time back before you figured out what was wrong and when you were sick? Tell me a little bit about that, like pre current Elizabeth. What year was that and what was going on?
Well, honestly, it goes back to childhood, which that sounds horrible, but I was one of those kids that always had a stomachache, and I would go to doctor after doctor. I remember going in and they would just tell my mom that it was stress, or that, it's just a kid thing. Sometimes they just say that they have a stomachache and it's really nothing. And I remember in college one time, a friend of mine, we were going for a walk. And I was a very gaseous person, so I would belch a lot, but it hurt. It wasn't something that it wasn't something to show off, like watch me. But I remember her telling me, she looked at me and she said, Elizabeth, you have a problem and you really need to go see a doctor. I'm like, oh no. I'm like, this is just normal. So I just kind of went along and I just thought people had stomach aches until one day I asked my husband, this was post 5 kids. I looked at him and I said, do you feel horrible every time you eat? And he just looked at me like I was crazy. He said, no. And I said, so you don't get like stomach aches or, you don't feel like you're going to throw up? And he's like, no, I mean, unless I'm sick or something, but no, I've never experienced that. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. I must have something serious going on. But it got to the point, I really just let all of these symptoms go because it was easier to hide them than to deal with them. It was easier to just let it go. Oh, that's just me getting older. Oh, that's just me. Oh, I have 5 kids. Oh, that's just whatever it was. I made excuses for it. At the time when I was extremely sick, it was after the birth of our last child. And it got to the point where I was crawling up the stairs. I had such severe bloating that one day I could wear a pair of jeans. The next day I couldn't even put them on or, not even zip them. I had joint pain in my right thumb so bad I couldn't open a water bottle. I had such severe digestive issues. I have IBS, and I was constipated severely for an entire year. Brain fog. Oh my goodness. There were just so many different things until it got to the point where I was going to my daughter's birthday party, and we were all going ice skating. And my husband looked at me, and everybody's getting their skates on, and I was just sitting there, and he said, "Aren't you going to go skating?" And I said, "No." I said, "I'm so dizzy I can barely stand right now." And that was the breaking point. I know the breaking point should have been way before that. But I got home and I got on the computer. I'm a researcher. I love to research. I love nutrition. I love to learn about it and figure out things that are going on. And I looked up gluten, and all of my symptoms were under gluten. And I thought, oh my goodness, wow, really? Okay. So I just started researching more that evening, and I thought, well, maybe I could try this. Maybe I'll go gluten-free and see what happens. At this point, I was the owner of an organic produce co-op, so everything I was eating was organic. I was baking my own bread. I was soaking my grains. Everything was organic again. And I was also making sourdough bread, so I wasn't using yeast products. So I thought I was really doing things right. But until I stopped eating gluten, I was never going to feel good. So I went to my daughter. She was having the stomach aches and the headaches at this point, and I said, would you want to try this with me? Let's just see if maybe this is our problem. Within 24 hours, I knew that gluten was one of my problems. And that's kind of where the journey started. And it was a couple weeks in, and I decided, I went to my husband and I said, listen, I know that this is my problem, and there's no way that I can make 7 different meals and have gluten in the house, not eat it, not allow my oldest daughter to eat it as well. And so I told him, I said, I think we all need to go gluten-free and really pay attention to what we're eating and what we're consuming. And he was all for it. He was really supportive and said, let's do it. No problem. Because I think he was at the point where he's like, I just want my wife back. And so that's what we did. I cleaned out, I had 100 pounds of flour in my freezer at that time. Cleaned everything out, sold everything I could food-wise, and started over again. I cleared out all grains, dairy. I basically went to a paleo diet, very strict on what I was eating, and the rest of my family went gluten-free. During this time, I just have to share with you, if you don't mind, what happened to everybody in my family. So first of all, I thought it was just for my daughter and I. My husband suffered from severe headaches, and he had an illness when our son was a baby. This was about 12 years ago, and it's called transient syndrome of headaches with neurological deficits and cerebral spinal fluid lymphocytosis, HANDL for short. But it took a few months for him to get better from this illness. But what happened was these horrible headaches that would wipe him out for an entire weekend. Once we went gluten-free, he has not had a headache in 3.5 years. And then my daughter had what I called alligator skin. It was like sandpaper. And once we went gluten free, her skin cleared up. We had tried every lotion, every coconut oil, anything possible to help with her skin. But I mean, Krista, as you know, everything shows up, but whatever's going on in the inside shows up on the outside.
Yep.
And so for her, yeah, you're like, absolutely. So for her, it showed up on her skin. And then the next one I'm going to share with you was from my son. And at the time he was 9 and he was a bedwetter, to the point where we could take him to he would go to the bathroom. He would stop drinking liquids a couple hours before he would go to bed. He would go to the bathroom before he went to bed. And then my husband or I would pick him up sleeping, stand him in front of the toilet before we went to bed for him to go to the bathroom as well. And he would still wet the bed, to the point where the bed would be soaking wet. And we went gluten free. It was almost instant that he stopped wetting the bed. And this was, he was 9 years old, so it was quite a long journey. And so there are so many different symptoms. And I was talking with a friend the other day who has been studying the brain and how inflammation works with the brain. And when I told her the story of my son, she just looked at me and smiled, and she said, absolutely. Because she said, when you have inflammation in the brain, the signals get crossed and he doesn't even realize that he's going to the bathroom. So that's it's been about 3.5 years when we got rid of gluten, and I'll never go back. It's something that I always stay clear of from my diet. So that's
that's dramatic.
Long story, kind of short.
No, that was dramatic. And I love how you know the results that are so fast. And I resonated so much when you talked about your symptoms, because I talk to people all the time that have very similar symptoms, and they're symptoms of essentially, like, if we don't have to just point at gluten, but of a lot of foods, it's an inflammatory response, like a lot of those symptoms, right? Like the headaches, absolutely, like your husband have, your joint pain, absolutely, like all the stomach pain, like absolutely. We know that those are so food sensitivity related. So I love that you took matters into your own hands and just dealt with that low-hanging fruit. And what I think was interesting that I didn't realize about your timeline is I didn't realize that you were already doing the produce co-op and that you already cared so much about nutrition and you already thought you were doing all the right things before you decided to take that next step, and you were still having those issues. So that's what I think is so interesting. And I actually kind of resonate. Like, I thought I was in perfect shape as well until, things get worse. And my brain fog was like, I am embarrassed at what I cannot remember. And, just all the things that sort of add up even when we think we're doing well. So I didn't know that about your timeline, and I thought that was really interesting. So,
oh yes, I thought I was super healthy, and I was volunteering at an organic farm for years, and I would bring home local organic produce, and so I really truly thought I was doing everything right, soaking my grains and everything. And like you said, yes, the gluten, but I've also cleared out, dairy, corn, soy, peanuts, and I'm now looking into, with my IBS, I'm looking into cleaning out some of the different sugars, apples and bananas, which is going to be really hard. But I know I'm still, after 3.5 years, my gut's still not healed. And so I just need to go that next step that I've been kind of waiting to do until things have kind of settled down. So that's what I will be working on next.
Well, I'm happy to give you some recommendations on that, because
that's
the thing, right? Like, you can remove the stressors and then you got to finish the job too. But I knew there was something else about your initial story that I thought was, because this was not a short, like, you just kind of gave us a big picture in a really condensed format, and you gave us all the results, which was amazing. But I know there was even more about it, right? You had eliminated some other things. And I know you were having some residual symptoms. And I think you told me it took you 7 years to actually find this particular sensitivity. And it was glycerin. Can you tell us a little bit more about what your symptoms were before you figured that one out?
Oh, Yes, me and glycerin are not friends by any stretch of the imagination. So it started with an allergic reaction on my ears. My ears swelled up like cauliflower. I had this rash that was covering my entire body. And I went to dermatologists. I went to different doctors. Actually, I was in the ER at one point because I don't know if it was just the stress of it, but I thought I was having trouble breathing is what I felt like. But once I got to the hospital, they're like, no, you're breathing, your oxygen level is fine. And I'm like, there's something serious going on and I don't know what it is. So, I didn't include that. So it was the rash. And what I finally found out was that it was, my shampoo and conditioner. Actually, I guess I should back up from that. The first reaction that I had, I forgot about this one because this was so long ago. It was from deodorant. And I would put deodorant on and I would have my underarms would be just raw and they would hurt so bad. So I stopped using deodorant. And then when I had the reaction to the shampoo and conditioner, I compared the ingredient list in both of them because, again, I'm using very natural products, environmental working group, the number 0. I was very strict on the products that I was using. And so I looked over that and the only thing that came back was glycerin. And so I looked up glycerin and, researched it. I talked to the doctor. No, you can't be he told me, no, you can't be allergic to glycerin. So I was like, okay, I'll just keep going. And so when I researched glycerin, I saw that it was just a natural byproduct of soap making. So I was like, okay, well, I can understand that a lot of commercial products probably add glycerin in after they've made their product. So that's what I was trying to steer clear of. And I found another product. I thought I was doing good. It didn't have glycerin in the ingredient. Again, had another severe reaction. And then I got to the point where I had so I had healed a lot from in the inflammatory part. It took me 7 months being very strict to no gluten, no dairy, soy, corn, peanuts, those kinds of things to get rid of the joint pain. Mm-hmm. So that was another thing is that some of my symptoms like the bloating, some of the head or the brain fog had gone away. Mm-hmm. But again, that it took a while being off of those foods to see the biggest results in my inflammation. Mm-hmm. And then, so at that point, I was having severe stomach aches, nauseousness, and canker sores to the point that my mouth would be completely full of them. And I was taking L-lysine like it was going out of style mm-hmm. to combat those canker sores. What I found out was that glycerin, after I had the third huge allergic reaction on the outside from another shampoo and conditioner, I saw that it had glycerin in it. So I was like, that has to be it. That has to be what I'm allergic to. And so I pulled out my fish oil. My fish oil capsules were made with glycerin. Mm-hmm. My toothpaste had glycerin in it. At that point, I was making my own deodorant. So coconut oil, baking soda, and tapioca starch. Mm-hmm. And so I knew exactly what was in that. So I was doing okay with that. But once got rid of the fish oil pills, especially the toothpaste and the shampoo and conditioners, is when I finally got rid of the stomach aches, the nauseousness, and the reactions on the outside. Unfortunately, just this summer, I had gone to the point where I was washing my hair. I was doing the baking soda and vinegar hair washing, but you get to the point where it's just not, my hair wasn't happy. And so I had found a new shampoo and conditioner. I thought I had done my research to find that it didn't include glycerin, but it was listed under a different name that I wasn't familiar with. Yes. Just about 2 weeks ago, I had another reaction. and it was the shampoo and conditioner. So I have gone to using no soaps at all, I use vinegar, apple cider vinegar to wash my hair now. My hair has actually never been healthier. And so I have been using my deodorant as a soap, which sounds so funny. But so
it's hard to find things without glycerin. The end. It is.
It's extremely hard. I can't wear makeup because of that. I use face powder. I have a powder that I can use, and some chapstick. I can use chapstick. It's like a coconut oil chapstick. I'm good with that. But other than that, yeah, I can't use any beauty products, which I'm okay with. I don't feel like I need it. Right? Mm-hmm. It saves me a lot of time in the bathroom too. I mean, just pour some vinegar on my hair and put some chapstick on, and I'm good.
Yeah. Everyone's like, whoa,
yeah.
Whoa.
I know, she's crazy.
No. I know that feeling. And in fact, let me just touch on that. Really funny. That's hilarious. Because remember, you had sent me a voice memo and said you laughed out loud at I think it's the second podcast where my sister-in-law said, yeah, we pack our own food when we go to your house because we're afraid we're starving. And you just laughed because you could resonate with the ideas. And I want to just say out loud, I want to, mention that this is all so familiar to me. And I know, like, I feel you and I know what you're going through. And I was going to just, reiterate that 100%. I see this with my clients that the joint pain can go away more slowly for sure. The digestive things should go away right away if you're hitting the right things on the head. Of course, there's shortcuts, right? But it sounds like, so you had some really amazing results right away with getting rid of gluten, but then it also took a little bit more time to find the rest of what was going on. And the glycerin was such a big thing. And I was going to touch on as well, you said, toothpaste, when you figured out the toothpaste, and by the way, like glycerin is in everything, right? So like the one toothpaste that doesn't have glycerin would be like Earth Paste by Redmond's. I don't know if there's other ones that you use, but I really like that toothpaste one. Yeah, I really like that one.
Yes.
Anyway, I was going to mention, I use this analogy sometimes. One, that sometimes the state of someone's mouth is really an outside picture of what the inside looks like, I think, because your mouth is like a gateway to like, you absorb things very well sublingually and in your mouth. So it's a big deal actually if you are using toothpaste that's not agreeing with you, because you absorb things so much in that area. So it makes a ton of sense when you said that. I just wanted to point that out a little bit. So the glycerin thing is really challenging actually. And there's some dietitians that do food sensitivity testing kind of like I do, and they'll talk about how they watch how it's made as like homework, right? Because there's some things that are really hard to know unless you actually know the processing of it. And that's not really necessarily the consumer's job always. Sometimes it is, like, especially with your situation, it's really good to know that. And so I try to do that, my due diligence for that. But glycerin's a tricky one because the source can be different things. I'm reading that it's sometimes vegetable, It's sometimes animal. And so it's just an issue for you all the way around. Or have you ever called companies and found there was different sources of it? I'm curious about that.
It's also made from coconut as well.
Yeah.
And so, I haven't done.
And how do you handle, coconut oil when that's an interesting thing. So I knew at one point we talked about it being derived from corn. And so sometimes I would think to myself when I have people that are really reactive to corn, how much should you really take away? Because ascorbic acid, which is, I talked about this in the supplement podcast, lab synthesized vitamin C is very often corn derived, not always, but often. And sometimes people are that sensitive where it just doesn't work for them either. Now, my goal is always to and I'm sure yours as well, to heal the inside, to reverse these issues long-term so that these aren't, long-term issues. But sometimes people still have issues I always tell people, you might not be able to overcome certain chemical sensitivities because that wasn't really a natural thing for your body anyway, or it causes more stress. Now, glycerin's kind of interesting. So yeah, it's really tricky. I'm sure you've done a bunch of research on trying to figure out, what, and I don't know if manufacturers are really able to tell you that very clearly sometimes. So what do you know about, you figured out it was glycerin, but then, how do you trace that back to which source? And, why is it the glycerin and not the source that's causing you the issue? And just curious a little bit more how much you've done on that.
Honestly, I haven't done a lot of research, and because I've gotten to the point where, and that's like that with the last reaction just a couple of weeks ago, I was so upset because I feel like I've cleared out. I've been on this journey for so many years now that I feel like I've cleared out so much stuff. And I was like, man, I'm using a pure soap. And so I actually had, I do a farmer's market on Fridays, and I had a lady come over to my market last time I was there, and she makes, goat milk soap. So she makes soap from goat milk. And we were talking about how glycerin is just a byproduct from the soap making process. And so she gave me a sample of her soap, and I honestly, I just stared at it because I don't know if I want to try it. I don't know if I want to go through that whole process again of trying something. And so that's where right now I don't want to have any more reactions right now. I want to just feel better. I want my skin to be happy. And so I don't want to try anything else right now. And I never even thought about calling the manufacturers and asking them how it was made. I just stopped using it. But especially with the products that I'm using, that they're more natural and they're smaller companies, I feel that they would be open to talking to me about it. So maybe I'll get to that point once I get sick of the vinegar. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
But I do okay with coconut products. So
that's interesting.
Maybe if it's derived from coconut, I'd be okay.
Yeah, that is interesting. And the other thing is that I want to point out to anyone else listening is that anything can cause anything, so like, even though the glycerin is really your trigger or one of your triggers, it can really be something like last week I had someone come to me. She had a really odd twinging in her leg. She said it was just so aggravating at night. Really, really bothered her. It was just she couldn't sleep because her leg was twinging, like in a kind of a spastic. It was kind of hard for her to describe, but we were able to get it resolved by getting rid of all of her inflammatory foods. But sometimes you don't know, like she was really inflammatory to apples. Like, really? How annoying. How would you know that?
Yes.
And it's really hard to people. And I have someone right now, their little boy's going to find out this week that he's really reactive to cucumbers. How would you know that? So sometimes it's nice to know that stuff. And then there's just so much people can do with, things that other people have really commonly found cause issues. And so the nice thing is that it sounds like you've made so much progress, and then the finishing touch is really just sealing it up. And honestly, the things that can really kind of throw our immune system and everything in turmoil, which kind of leads us to the next point about your story, is the stress. And you've actually kind of had a stressful summer. It's just been kind of crazy. So you recently moved from Florida to Colorado, but not that you were just moving. I mean, you visited there, you loved it, you thought it was beautiful, but it was a little more extreme than that. You moved to Colorado first to help at a camp. I think your husband was asked to really help as being kind of in head of this camp, and you can tell us, but you kind of lived in a tiny cabin. There's a lot of moving parts to that, right? So you lived in a house for a long time, you got 5 kids, all of a sudden you downsize. Tell us what happened.
Yes. So I'm glad that the summer is over and now I can look back and laugh. I walked into my family room one day, and I guess I should start back. I've been, since going gluten-free and pulling out the inflammatory foods that have really bothered me, I've started working on myself personally as well. So personal development, fitness, which I've always been into fitness, but I started using it as a time for my mental status. So yes, it's good for physical wellness as well, but it was also, for me, it was mental, and it was my kind of my stress releaser. And during that time working on myself, I just became more aware. I had a friend tell me I went through a spiritual awakening, and I looked at it, I was like, I have no clue what that is. So I'm going to go Google that and figure out if that was me. And yes, that was me. And I'm just more aware of everything around me, of people. And I was really aware of stuff around me and the energy that other people brought to my space. And I walked into my family room one day, and I stopped and I looked around and I thought, I don't like anything in here, and I don't want to look at it anymore.
That's hilarious.
And when it is, I know. And my husband is such a wonderful person, and he's really kind of gone along with me on this journey and been open to different things. And so when he walks in and I told him I don't want to look at any of this stuff anymore, he's like, okay, sweetie, let's just talk a little bit more about this. And but we had this almost 2,900 square foot house that, I mean, it was great, but it was overwhelming. It took me forever to clean. It was, again, just filled with stuff that really didn't mean anything. And we lived on this beautiful lake. We received this big wooden playhouse for free. The neighbors were getting rid of it. Like, well, do you want this? And we're like, sure, we got plenty of room. Throw it in the back. And until we moved, I didn't realize that house took up the space of me, the view of my lake. And I didn't realize, like, when we moved it was, oh my goodness, you can see the lake from here. And so all of this stuff just took up so much room and so much energy from me cleaning, looking at it, pick things up, figuring out what we actually needed and what we didn't. And so it was time to downsize, we said. And so we just started slowly getting rid of things. We started going through each space and really looking at it and deciding what we wanted in it. And so for me, it was, if it brings me joy, I want to keep it. If it does not bring me joy, I want to get rid of it. A lot of the stuff was my husband's. And so we had to work it out together. But what happened during this time
way to work through your relationship?
No, he loves me so much.
He sounds like a patient man.
He is. I think he is. But what happened, we got a phone call and from a friend that we had worked with, actually when we met, Scott and I met at a camp for people with special needs. And she called and she said, hey, I'm moving out to Colorado. I'm going to be working at this camp for people with special needs. Would you guys come out for the summer and help out? Scott would be the camp director. I would do yoga and cooking classes and nature hikes. And I'm like, yes, we will be there. And it wasn't even talk to the kids, talk to Scott. I just knew that this was something that we had to do. He was at the time was a teacher and I was homeschooling. I was, at this point, sweet Elizabeth wasn't even born. So I thought, I'm working from home. I can definitely do this. We came out for the winter just to check out the camp and see what Colorado was all about, because neither one of us had ever been out here. And it was gorgeous. It was absolutely beautiful. And my husband knew that at that point, his teaching career, he was done. He was done teaching and he wanted something different. Me, on the other hand, I loved Florida. I loved the warm weather. I loved the humidity. And I didn't want to leave. Fast forward 2 months, I went to a conference out in Boulder in Colorado, and I fell in love with the mountains. I went hiking by myself, and I thought, okay, it's time for our next step. And so the only downfall was that the only housing available for the summer was a 520 square foot cabin. And we thought, okay, no big deal. We can do this. We will just get rid of a lot of stuff, which we did. We sold bedroom sets. We sold furniture. We sold stuff. We donated a ton. And at that point, we decided, I guess I skipped over, Scott was also offered a full-time position. So he was offered the summer thing, but then that way would turn into a full-time thing. So we decided that it was time for this next chapter, and we moved into this 520 square foot.
You each get 100
a
square
lot
feet.
of our stuff. Oh yeah, I mean, not even. There's
Not
7 of us, 2 cats and a hamster.
Oh.
Yeah, right. I know. It's seriously.
Well, God
like,
forbid we
downsize
on the cat and hamster. I mean, we need to take those along too, so the kids have something to do.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. I do have to say that it was extremely challenging. extremely. And the part that was so hard about it was, when you move, you think that you're going to this comfortable new home, this, you kind of have this transition period. We didn't have it. Like, we moved, and then Scott started working, camp started, and we were both working. The kids were working. My daughter she was volunteering doing the arts and crafts program. My son was a wonderful dishwasher. He did some great dishwashing. And, but we lost a lot of comforts. We didn't have a dishwasher. We didn't have a washer dryer. We didn't have a bathtub. We we had a shower. We called it the coffin shower because you don't bend over in it. You just kind of stand there and turn. And that's about it. And we have two daughters with sensory processing disorder. And so if you know anything about it, it's bath time for us is a sacred time. It's a time for them to decompress. It's a time for them to relax and to kind of let go of the stresses of the day. And we were able to use a bathtub. It was just down the mountain. So that doesn't really help with the relaxation bedtime process. And so I think that for me, that was going to the 520 square feet. That was the hardest part. Well, of course, losing the personal space. You have no personal space there. So those are the things. But my kids didn't fight like I thought they would, which sounds insane. Going from 2,900 square feet to 520, you would think that there would be constant fighting. But they were outside. They were with the campers. They were learning from the amazing staff that we had here over the summer. They were volunteering their time to help people with special needs, and I couldn't teach them what they learned this summer. And so that was our reason in coming out here, was to give them an experience that nothing else could, and to foster a growth that they could only do here. And so that happened. That happened this summer. And now that we have moved into the mansion, we call it, which is 1,200 square feet, it's good. It's homey. It's comfortable. We still brought way too much stuff. But I'm so glad to be in a smaller space. And the stuff really doesn't mean much anymore.
I think that your life really aligned because
Yes.
it was almost like a divine intervention, because before you knew that you were going to be moving to a place a fifth of the size, you'd already started getting rid of the things that didn't bring you joy. If it brought me joy, I kept it. If it didn't bring me joy, I got rid of it. That started, I think we talked about this. It started, maybe you started reading a book, or was there a reason that you started reading that book about that?
Well, Essentialism is the book that I read. And it was because the stuff didn't mean anything to me. That's really what it was.
And why did you start that book?
I started it because I wanted to live a simpler life, and I wanted a life of joy. And that was really it. We were so consumed by stuff and by taking care of this massive house and everything that came with it, that I just didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't want to be, I wanted to go, and I wanted to be in nature. I wanted to spend time with my kids. I wanted to enjoy every day and not feel like I was drowning every day, because that's how I felt. I felt like I was drowning. And also with electronics, I wanted to be able to have a place, and not that they couldn't do this in Florida, but the 2,900 square feet allowed them places that they could hide very easily. Now we're together as a family, and I can easily see when they're sneaking electronics, and I can tell them to go outside. And where we're at in the mountains, I mean, we're in Pike National Forest, and so you just want to be outside here. You want to be in nature and exploring and learning and trying new things and meeting new people. That's another part of it, is that it was definitely hard leaving the people that we did, but it's so wonderful to have a new adventure and meet new people and learn new things and listen to new stories. I love listening to people's stories and just kind of hearing where they came from and their struggles and their triumphs in that as well. But you're absolutely right. It kind of just started. I think it started when I started cleaning up my health. Really, I wanted all the areas of my life to be cleaned up.
Because there's so many different areas that are important for whole health and whole happiness. And you kind of have to pick them off one by one. Like, it just doesn't happen to do it all at once. It's prioritization. And once you started feeling better, then you kind of looked around and said, maybe I was filling my life with stuff before to make myself think I felt better, but I really didn't. So there's something to be learned a lot. And I just want to give our listeners a couple more. For one, I love how you love listening to other people's stories. And I hope and know that people will enjoy listening to your story today. And two, you read the book Essentialism, and I read the book It's All Too Much, which I also thought was good as an audio book. And it kind of takes you through, and maybe we'll have someone speak directly on this, but I just think there's a lot to be said about, why do we keep the things that we keep, and what does it say about us, and what about the baggage that we hold on to? And so it's really interesting to just get some take home points, even if it's just a few. One of them that stuck out from my book, and I think we got one from you. I don't know if you have any more. If it brings you joy, you'll keep it, but if not, you don't. One of the ones I got was, you keep all these things because they have sentimental value or they're memorabilia, but if you're not really displaying them and honoring them, are they really that sacred and important? You have to actually be honest with yourself on some of those things. So there's a lot to be said about diminishing all the types of baggage, for sure.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what it is baggage.
Exactly.
And it holds you down. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a lot of this whole episode, I think, is about baggage, I think. And when we first began talking, when we first talked about your food struggles, you shared a story with me about your dad and how you cared for him and how you nourished him back to health. And I actually have worked in kidney disease for a long time. I think that was one of his issues. Tell me a little bit more about what was going on with him when you were helping him, because it kind of leads us on to the next topic about baggage.
I think with my dad, I do what I do because of him. I watched him suffer for so many years. His first hospitalization was when he was 24, and it was with pneumonia. And I had to take care of him. And so when I say I do what I do because of him, is because I don't want my kids to take care of me because I didn't take care of myself. And I'm not saying things won't happen. And, yes, I could get sick from cancer or anything. I could be in a car accident, but I want to do what I can to take care of my health, because I know what it's like to take care of a parent, and it's excruciatingly painful. And so through the years, there were many times where I would take him in and he would live with us, and I would nurse him back to health. And it was really changing the way he ate, being around joy, and being around people that loved and cared for him, because he spent a lot of time alone. And so the last time that he lived with us, he was incontinent. He had a feeding tube. He was on so many medications that he really didn't even know where he was. And he wasn't walking. He was in a wheelchair, and he was a dialysis patient. And we laugh. And there are certain points that I can laugh at now. Like, we called him the dad with 100 lives, because we were always at the hospital, and he would go into the hospital and he would be intubated and on a breathing machine. And we would just think, this is it, that we need to say our goodbyes. And that's when he started dialysis. And so he would always bounce back. He had such a will to live and such a fight, and he was so strong, and this grit that I have, and I'm so grateful for. But when he came to live with me, it was when we first started our homeschooling adventures. And it was, I don't even know if it was a month in, and he came to live with us. And I thought, well, my kids are going to learn how to use work a feeding tube. They're going to learn, about wheelchairs and walkers and taking care of somebody who's ill. And that's what I did. And with this feeding tube, he was on, gosh, I don't remember what it was, but a can of formula. Mm-hmm. And the first ingredient in this formula was corn syrup solids. And I looked at that and I thought, oh my goodness, one of the sickest people on the planet, and they're feeding him corn syrup solids. And so I decided, you want to talk to your doctor. This is just what I did for my father. But I started making my own food. I would make him soups and I would puree it. So he would be getting the great nutrition, gut healing benefits from bone broth that was made at home, and vegetables, and organic grass-fed meats, and that's what I would feed him through his feeding tube. We weaned him off of a bunch of medications that he was on that he shouldn't have been on, and I started working on healing his gut. He was getting some different supplements. I was giving him probiotic every day. And within 3 months, he was walking. He had the feeding tube removed, and he was continent again. He was back to the point where in 3 months, I was able to send him home by himself, which was for me to know that I helped him get better was such a great feeling. Unfortunately, when somebody goes back home and back to maybe their own ways where, you can change the food, and I could do whatever I could for him. But until he was ready to change, I couldn't make him change. And so when he lived with me, he had to do the things that I wanted him to, because he wasn't driving at that point. But when he went back home, he was able to make his own decisions, and he went back to eating the foods that weren't right for him. And within a couple weeks, he was back into the hospital. And so it was really sad. He actually had a wound on his leg. That's what it was. That's what he went back in. And I had these Manuka honey bandages, and he was supposed to change them every day, or not change them every day, but have them on. And then whenever he needed them changed, put a new one on. And just from that simple thing of not taking care of his wound, that's what ended him back up in the hospital. And we started the whole process over again of his muscles getting weak again. And eventually went back on the feeding tube. He had the feeding tube twice, came back, got rid of the feeding tube again. And so it was just this long process, but I know that if he were able to care for himself the way that I'm caring for myself, I know he wouldn't have been so sick. And I know that he would have had a better quality of life. And the last few years for him, it was really poor in quality of life. And it was hard. It was very hard on my brother and sister and I, because we had to watch him. We had to watch him decline, and we had to watch him not take care of himself. And so that's my driving force, in that I don't want my kids to have to do that and have to go through that pain.
That's really amazing. I think that, one, your kids are becoming like you, patient servants that are the kind of people that we don't have enough of, that make the world better. I wrote this quote down and I circled it and I highlighted it, and I'll be sharing it. I don't want my kids to take care of me because I didn't take care of myself. And I just think, how much maturity does it take to think that way? So much, and so much forethought, and just why wouldn't you want to be independent and feel amazing? But you can do that because you've already taken yourself from not being able to walk up the stairs to not being able to open a water bottle to feeling fantastic. So you can see the change and the difference. You know it's possible. You have so many incredible transformations within your own family. It's amazing. And I love that you are able to give the timelines, what helped, what worked, so he comes to you with a feeding tube, incontinent, in a wheelchair, and in 3 months of fantastic nutrition, despite a lifelong of not that good, you've made it so that he can function and walk and be continent. And it doesn't take, for example, it doesn't take very much time at all to have muscle atrophy or, degradation by not using it. So yeah, when you get hospitalized or when you get into, a position where you're not able to use your own functions and, it really limits your independence, which is challenging. And so sometimes people just kind of give up, but some people don't give up and they do amazing. And you didn't give up, which was incredible. That's a very amazing story. I hope people learn a lot from it. I have to share a funny article with you as well about tube feeding formulas and all those things, just because it's interesting and relevant. I'll have to share that with you afterwards. But so this that is a happy and sad story, and it ends in a little bit of a sad story because just in the last couple of months, when you were in Colorado, you'd already moved there for camp, right? This summer when your dad passed away.
Yeah. So
you had a crazy summer. And were you expecting that to happen? Did you know that was coming?
No. And it sounds funny for me to say no because we called him the dad with 100 lives because we'd done it so many times. We had gone, every time he had gone in the hospital, like, it's funny, like you think you're going to walk in and be like, okay, this is it. Like we need to say our goodbyes. And they've called us to the hospital before years ago. And they've talked about hospice for years. And so it wasn't, it was always in the back of my mind. It was like, which phone call was it going to be? But coming here, like when I left, it was really hard to leave. And I guess I should share this too, is that knowing that my father was so ill and moving across the country away from him was extremely hard. And I think that part of the tiny home living, the stress and the guilt of leaving him was so hard. The last day of our trip out here, it took us 4 days to drive out here. And the last day we were getting in the car and I had this phone call and it was a 800 number and I was busy and I was trying to get the kids in and I thought, I'm not going to answer it yet. I'll get it when on the way. And usually you don't have voicemails from 800 numbers. And so I thought, I better listen to this. And it was the medical alert for my dad. And they said, he had fallen, that the ambulance was on the way. And he had gone home. He had been gone home for 2 days. He was at home for 2 days by himself, and he was in a wheelchair because he had been in the hospital for so long, and his muscles were so weak. But he had walked to his bed, and where he had to stop his wheelchair because he had carpet. So he walked to his bed, and then he walked back, and he was getting back to the wheelchair, and he fell. And unfortunately, it was on his tanks of oxygen. And luckily, there was somebody at the door at the time. They were coming to pick him up for dialysis. And so he had already had a hip replacement, but he had broken something outside of the hip replacement, and they weren't going to be able to do anything. So as I'm driving the opposite direction of him, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Like, how can I be going the opposite direction? And I should really be there. And my brother actually on the same day, just within hours, lost one of his employees. And I thought, I need to go back. I need to turn around. I called my sister-in-law and she set me straight. She said, absolutely not. She said, this is a new chapter in your life. You have to keep going forward. You have to keep moving. You can't allow what everybody else is doing to stop you. And so, yes, my father was ill when I left, but I couldn't stop my life any longer, where I felt like there had been ever since I can remember, I had taken care of him. And so I just couldn't do it any longer. And so when coming out here, I thought I was going to see him in a few months. That's our plan was to meet in Arizona. We were going to have a vacation, him and I, and we were going to go visit his sister. And so it wasn't a thought that he wasn't going to be here any longer. And so he had gone back in for the broken hip, went back to rehab, went back in for his heart, went back to rehab. This is all within a 5-week period. And then during this time, though, we had some amazing times together. We would FaceTime, and he wasn't walking really at this time. And I would take him for hikes. We live in this gorgeous area, and so I would hike with him, and I would have him on FaceTime, and I would show him Pikes Peak, and I would show him the birds that would be flying by, and just he could hear the crunch of the gravel under my feet, and so we had special time together during that time. And my brother FaceTimed me one morning, and it was Monday, July 3rd, and he said, Dad, Dad's back in the hospital, because he had gone to rehab. We FaceTime, and I looked at him, and he was purple. They thought he had an allergic reaction. But when I looked at him, I knew it wasn't. I knew there was something more to it. And so I looked at him, I said, Dad, I'm coming to see you. And he's like, absolutely not. I'm walking out of here. They keep talking to me about this hospice thing, and I'm leaving. I'm not doing any of that. And so I was like, okay, no problem. And I took him for a hike, and we talked, and then I came back down, and I got off the phone or the FaceTime, and I called my brother, and I said, I'm flying out, tomorrow. And I did. And I flew out, and I went, and I didn't bring the kids. My husband didn't come. It was just me. And I was just there with him. And I walked into his hospital room Tuesday night, and at that time he was kind of having hallucinations. But that morning he was. And I walked in, and he looked at me. He said, Elizabeth, is that you? And I was like, yeah, Dad, it's me. And I walked over to his bed, and he just kept putting he had the softest, he had the softest hands. And he just could put them on my face, and he's like, you're here. And he was holding my hands and squeezing them. And I said, yeah, Dad, I'm here. And I'm here just to spend time with you. And we're just going to talk. And we did. And we sat there for hours just talking. And I got to tell him about Colorado, and he was so worried about the fires. And he was talking to me about what my roof needed to be made out of. And how far are you from trees, and can they fall on you? And I'm like, oh, Dad, I'm surrounded by trees. But how concerned he was for me. And so I got to spend his time with him. And during this time, he was getting very sick. He started getting bed sores, and he was on a lot of pain medications at this time. And there would be hours where I would just sit and hold his hand. And I reached out. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to lose him. I had never lost anybody that close to me before. And I wanted to make sure that I didn't regret anything. So I started reaching out to friends that had lost their parents. And I actually reached out to a lot of friends because I wanted to do it right. And one friend in particular, she met me for tea, and I looked at her and I said, Heather, I don't know how to do this. She had lost both of her parents. And I said, I want to say something to him. I want to talk to him. I want to ask him questions. I want to tell him stuff. And she looked at me and she said, you're not at that point. And she said, it's too late for that. And she said, there's nothing that you can ask him that's going to make any of this better. And she said, what you need to do is you need to say thank you. And those were the two of the most powerful words I've ever used. I went back to his hospital room, and I had 45 minutes with him where he was awake and so alert. He was in pain, but he was able to hear me. He was able to talk to me. That was my last 45 minutes with him. And I thanked him. I thanked him for being my dad. I thanked him for loving me only the way that he could. I thanked him for bringing me into this world. I thanked him for so much, for everything I could, for being, he never he always supported my decisions and never judged it. He just, even if it was hurting, and I knew us moving to Colorado, he never said a cross word. And he was always very supportive, and you need to do what's right for you, and this is for your family, and I'm going to see you, and we will visit. And he didn't say, well, what about me? And I'm sick and you're leaving me. He was always supportive. And I thanked him for that because it meant the world to me. And so thank you. And I'm sorry. I feel like those are 4 words that are so powerful and can be so helpful in a time of struggle. And so that was Saturday. And Saturday night, I just sat there for hours. And the nurses would come in, do you need a blanket? Do you need a cup of coffee? Anything? And I said, no, I'm going to go home. I'm just going to sit here for a little bit longer. And that night I couldn't leave. I didn't want to leave. And maybe it was because I knew. But I sat there for a while and I thought, okay, what would Dad want? What would he want me to do? And I knew, because I was thinking about staying the night, and he wouldn't want me to stay the night. He would want me to go home and get some rest. And that's what I asked him. I said, Dad, when he was feeling a little bit better, one of the first days I was there, I said, Dad, what advice do you give me? And he said, you need to take breaks more often. And I was like, okay, yeah, sounds good. And I said, well, what advice do you give to the kids? And he said, you need to tell your kids to give you more breaks. And so you can rest. And I was like, okay. So at that moment I thought, okay, he told me I need to rest. So I thought I need to go back home. I need to get some rest, and I'll be back in the morning. And at 6:23 Sunday morning, I got a call from the nurse and said that his condition had changed, and that we needed to bring the family. And so I did. I called my brother and my sister, and fortunately we're all there. We're all within 20 minutes. And, but within a few minutes she called me back, and he was gone. And I've learned so much from losing him, which it sounds weird, but he's taught me so much in his passing, and I'm so grateful for it. And I just try to, the connections that I made from reaching out to friends that have lost people close to them, those talks that we had are priceless to me. And what I've learned from them, and through losing him, I will be grateful for, which may sound funny, but I'm just so grateful for that. And he sent 2 words to the next generation, and it's stand tough. And I thought, you know what? That's what I'm going to do when things get hard, like this move. It was hard. It was very hard. But I'm going to stand tough, and I'm going to continue to do the things that I need to do for me, for my health, for my family, for my husband, for my business. And I'm going to, I'm not going to, I'm going to keep going. His legacy is going to live on through me and through my kids and through what we do and through what I share with other people. And just being grateful.
I don't even know
being grateful.
If I could ask you any other questions that could help summarize as much as you just did there. I think that was a first. I've never cried, and I don't know if the interviewee has ever cried in the middle of the interview, but I appreciate the raw realness and relatableness that you've brought today. And I don't even know how we can title this episode, because there's so much value. Like, that's what it is.
I don't know if you can hear this bird in the background, but I'm sitting outside talking to you. And since losing my father, I have had such a connection to nature and to everything around me. And that bird came up, and he just sat. He was staring at me at this tree, and he just started squawking really loud, and that would totally be my dad. And so he's everywhere around me, and I see it in everything. And I'm reminded of him all the time, and it's so reassuring. So I hope you got the squawks of the bird.
Yeah, I absolutely did. And you know, what's interesting about you saying that is I have some other friends that lost their mother prematurely. And sometimes they would share on Facebook about this hawk that always came and sat on their dad's doorpost. And he was always there, he or she, I'm not sure which, but always there at the most opportune times. It's just really interesting that you even mentioned that. So I think that life is amazing. And, you know, there's just like, if you stop and listen and look more often, like it's amazing what you'd notice. And I feel like you've embodied that completely so much. I don't even know if I can ask these other questions because I feel like you touched on so much important, like just on things I can't even put a finger on how important they are. And I hope that it's valuable to you that you've recorded this while it's still sort of fresh, because you know what happens as time goes on is these memories and feelings are less fresh. So I hope that you'll be able to look back on this fondly. It wasn't that long ago we were voice memoing back and forth, and on the note of like, I just think, man, there was so much value the way you said, you know, the most important words that you could say to someone was thank you or I'm sorry, and his, you know, last sentiments were to stand tough. But we were also talking about how we take on the baggage and pain of others sometimes. And this was through the grieving process of after you lost your dad. You know, I know you were running and you were having some conversations in your head, literally, right? And you literally started speaking out loud. Do you remember that?
Yes. Yeah. So, it was, gosh, it was soon, after he passed, and, I came back to Colorado, and if I can just share one quick thing, I know it doesn't, it kind of goes along with this. What I realized through losing my dad was that, in grief, people want to know that, by not recognizing, let me go back. When I lost my dad, I had to come back to camp, and I knew everybody knew what happened. And it was going to be hard. I knew I was going to be reminded of losing him, and I had to kind of go through everything with each staff member and my family and everything. And, it was harder when people didn't recognize that he had passed. And so if I can share with anything is to recognize when people have passed, and because it's not a reminder of it is not going to bring everything back. It's just going to make it brings comfort to be able to talk about him and to share my memories. And so when I was going for this run, it was only a few days that I had been back, and I needed that for my sanity, really. And I was running, and I was getting towards the end. And when I run, I clear my head, and I can really, I feel like great thoughts come, and things that I would never think come to me. And I was thinking about him. I talk to him a lot. I tell him, different things that are going on. And at this point, I was thinking about his life. And I was thinking he had a really hard life. He had a really hard childhood. It was, there was a lot of pain. There was a lot of abuse. And he also suffered from mental illness. And that took quite a few years away from me. And so during this run, I was saying, I wish this. I wish you didn't have this pain. I wish you didn't have a horrible child. I wish you were still here. I wish, you didn't have to go through these things. And I wish you weren't sick. And I wish I didn't have to watch all of this. And then all of a sudden, like I threw my arms in the air, and I was yelling at him, and I was like, Dad, oh my gosh, Dad, and I was still running and my arms in the air and like, you don't have to live in pain anymore. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, and I don't either. And I just started screaming to him like, Dad, we're letting it go. I'm sorry, I'm getting really worked up now, but I was like, we're letting go of all of the pain, everything that you had held on to for so long. And my parents had gone through an ugly divorce, and I held on to that pain and that guilt. And for so long, I held on to his pain. I held on to his horrible childhood. I held on to his illness. I held on to his mental illness. And I had taken it on as my pain. And at that moment, I realized it. And I was like, no longer am I holding on to it. And you're not holding on to it any longer either. And I just kept screaming and joy that we were both letting go of this pain that I feel like has held us both down for so long. And I was running up the mountain, and there were two of the staff that worked here at the camp, and I looked at them and I was like, it's been 39 years and I'm letting it go. I'm letting go of all the pain. And they probably looked at me like I was a nut job, but I just had to share all of it and to let it all go and let somebody know that the pain was gone and I wasn't holding on to it any longer. So, we definitely take on other people's energy and other people's, pain, and stuff that doesn't belong to us. And I feel like
Real life. That's okay.
Okay. I don't know if you can, or just to not holding on to things that don't belong to you. And I think that was part of getting rid of the physical stuff. A lot of that stuff was given to me. I didn't want it. It wasn't mine. It wasn't stuff that brought joy to my space. And so sometimes we hold on to other people's pain, and letting go of that was when we can truly be free. And so surrounding yourself with people that bring you joy, surrounding yourself by people who bring you positive energy and excitement and fun. And yes, of course you're going to have bad days and you're going to have things that aren't good, but letting go of even the relationships that aren't bringing you the energy and the positiveness that you need in your life, so that you can move on and you can be a better person and bring better to the world.
Oh my gosh. You have really covered so much. I mean, you talked about losing the bad health habits. You talked about losing the physical things in life that's just stuff that doesn't give us joy. And you've talked about losing life and how through losing life, how you learned so much at the same time, because you have no choice but to go forward unless you want to go backwards. And we all want to go forward. So I just thank you so much for everything you shared today, because I think you offered our audience so much, and I hope that they're as touched by everything that you shared as I am, and just gleaned so much. I mean, you could listen to this 3 times and get so many different takeaways, because you talked about so much. Is there any other gut reaction on what you would tell someone listening right now that really feels like he or she has some of the issues that you've been talking about, trouble with the releasing baggage, and exactly what you just sort of ended on is how we take on everyone else's baggage as well. And we take on the pains. We take on the pains of others, and we kind of let them become our own. Is there any other departing words or advice that you need to give someone to take with them today?
Yeah. And I think it's the words from my father, and stand tough, because things aren't always easy. And even though it's hard, it doesn't mean it's not right. And it's funny because I just questioned my husband on this. Like, this move has been very hard. Living in the tiny cabin was very hard. Losing my dad was extremely hard. Trying to build my business here in Colorado. And I felt like things were, it was hard. It was just hard. And I looked at him the other day and I said, if it's meant to be, shouldn't it be easy? And he just looked at me and laughed. My husband did. And he's like, no. I was like, okay. And I was like, and that's what it is. I just need to, you just got to keep moving forward. So is changing your diet and everything that you've done for however many years easy? Absolutely not. Is it worth it? Yes. 100 times yes. It is more than worth it, because all we have is our health. That's all we have. And if you don't have your health, you can't go and enjoy life, and you can't enjoy the people that you're around. And if you don't have health, nobody wants to sit and be unhealthy with you. So I really think that's it, is just to keep going and to do it and to know that it's worth it. It's all worth it. And to stand tough.
I am glad I never skipped that question, because people always drop this amazing like nugget of knowledge that pretty much it didn't even have to summarize. It was just like, yes, exactly. 100 times. Yes. Thank you so much. Like, I just love my friends. I love surrounding myself with amazing people. It is refreshing. And spending this time with you today, I appreciate you so much. I appreciate you allowing me to share your story with this audience, because it's just so powerful, and we need more powerful, uplifting stories that are just motivating and invigorating. I don't know how to describe what you just did for us, but it was amazing. So I appreciate that so much. And for people that want to stick with you and follow your story, where can they find you?
So you can find me on Facebook at Sweet Elizabeth Organics. I also have an Instagram page under Sweet Elizabeth Organics, and a website. And on my Facebook page, I've actually been making videos. It's called The Sweet Life. And the last one I did was quite a few weeks ago, and it was before my dad's services, and kind of what I was feeling and what I was going through. So if you want to watch that, that is on my Facebook page. I just try to share these little nuggets of what I'm going through to hopefully help others on their journey. And, but I also, so my business is Sweet Elizabeth Organics, and I make allergy-free baking mixes. So chocolate cake, vanilla cake, a coffee cake, pancakes, brownies, and I know I forgot one.
There's like some, oh, you said coffee cake already. I feel like there's new ones. Brownies. I hope we get to sample all these in November.
So, well, oh yes, actually, so Krista, we will be at the Food Allergy Blogging Conference in Denver in November, and Sweet Elizabeth is actually donating product. So, they will actually be making my products to serve to all the attendees.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm really excited about that. And I've been looking, and that was part of the business part of being so hard, is that I've been looking for a commercial kitchen in Colorado, and I felt like everywhere I turned, it was just kind of a no, that's not going to work, and can't do this, and this is too expensive, and that doesn't fit in the budget. And just this morning, I met with somebody that I've been talking to actually all summer, and I left there and I just looked up. I was like, Dad, was this you? Like, did you put all this together? Mm-hmm. Because today, like, things have just fallen into place, and I found a commercial kitchen. Not only is it a commercial kitchen, but it's gluten-free, it's peanut-free, it's tree nut-free, I mean, except for coconut, but USDA considers coconut as a tree nut, even though it doesn't have the same properties. So my products do contain coconut, but it will have the commercial kitchen, and then we'll also be opening up a small cafe, myself and the other kitchen owner. And so we're really excited about the new adventures. And so for right now, I will be at the local Woodland Park Farmers Market on Fridays, and then hopefully October, I'll be able to open my shopping cart back up on my website. It's been closed for a few months because I've just been focusing on the farmers market, and obviously a lot of craziness this summer. And then hopefully we'll be up and running October. If not, the cart will be back open in November.
Yeah, for sure.
And if you're ever sorry.
No, go ahead. What were you going to say?
In Old Colorado City is is where the kitchen is. And so if you're ever in Colorado Springs area, you'll have to look me up and come on over and try out Sweet Elizabeth's.
See, that's the kind of person you are. I mean, I feel like you're my neighbor because you're so wholesome, down to earth, and I feel like you don't just go everywhere and meet people that are as amazing as you. So thank you for being in my life. I love it so much. You are the best. And so, yes, so people will be able to order your products again, hopefully by October. But I mean, let's just give you, like, I think things fell into place when they needed to fall into place. You were very busy being a camp counselor, being in charge of camp, doing the family thing all summer. So everything is working out as it should. Now that you've moved, you've got the commercial kitchen space, you'll be back at it. And after hearing this, I'm sure everyone would love to try and taste your products that help people feel good about themselves. I forget what the tagline is, but that taste good and make you feel good, basically.
Oh, yes. Live sweetly. That's my little tagline too.
I love it. I love it.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Anytime
Thank you, my friend.
Anytime, the card is back open, we'll make sure to add that to the show notes. But at any time, people listen to these at all different times. So I can't wait to hear if people try your mixes. But if you have any feedback, please feel free to send it to hello@lessstresslife, and we'll pass it on to Elizabeth. So thank you so very much for coming on today and sharing your soul with us. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Krista. It has been wonderful, and I just love chatting with you, girl.
I do too.
You're like my soul sister.
That's perfect. Can't wait to meet you soon. All right, we'll talk soon.
I know. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So I'm editing this at a conference, and the sound is not nearly as good. I hope you can tolerate it. I just wanted to mention that, wow, this episode, though it may have been long, I hope it flew by for you, because for me, there's just so many fascinating pieces about Elizabeth's story and gems that she shared, and I really hope you appreciate it. I want you to know that her commercial kitchen is up and running, and she is shipping from sweetelizabethsorganics.com, and there is a discount code for you if you want to try any of her baking mixes or goodies, and that code is less stressed. So I hope you try it and let us know how you like it. I'll be spending some time with Elizabeth, like we said, next month at another conference. So I'm so excited for that, and I'll let you know how it goes. Talk soon.